A very good evening to all of you. In the midst of one of the most critical and dangerous crises that has gripped the Middle East region in recent years, a somewhat unusual and intriguing narrative has begun to emerge, suggesting that Iran, despite being under immense military and economic pressure, might have actually emerged from this conflict with unexpected gains that no one could have possibly foreseen. This narrative rapidly gained widespread attention, fueled by the significant surge in global oil prices and a noticeable increase in the demand for Iranian crude oil, along with extensive discussions and speculation regarding a potential fundamental shift in the world's economic power balances. And at this point, we need to stop and seriously consider, is what has occurred truly a significant economic transformation in favor of Iran? Or is it merely a temporary consequence stemming from the exceptional circumstances imposed by the ongoing war? This is precisely the crucial question that we will be addressing here today. The war between America and Israel on one side and Iran on the other was not just a simple military conflict. This was a war that had a direct and significant impact on the most vital artery of the global economy, energy. The war has lasted for about 40 days, up until the recording of this video. During this entire period, global markets have entered a state of severe anxiety, especially with the escalating tensions in the Gulf region. At this point, we absolutely must pause and consider a very crucial factor: the Strait of Hormuz. This strait is a vital passage for approximately 20% of the world's oil, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration's data. This implies that any tension or unrest in this particular region inevitably leads to a significant rise in prices and widespread global instability, which is precisely what we have witnessed. Before the war, Iran was facing an extremely difficult and challenging situation. The imposed sanctions forced the country to sell its oil at a very significant discount, often more than $10 below the standard Brent crude price. However, with the commencement of the war, the entire situation began to undergo a significant transformation. Reports from Reuters are now indicating that refineries, especially those operating within China, have commenced purchasing Iranian oil at prices that are remarkably close to Brent crude, and in some cases, they've even exceeded the rates seen in other deals. So, what exactly transpired? I can explain it to you quite simply. The global market was deeply concerned about potential disruptions and shortages in supplies. There's a considerable apprehension regarding the possible disruption of the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran currently holds a substantial amount of ready inventory available for sale out at sea. So, what is the ultimate result of all this? The result is that Iran has suddenly transformed from being a seller who was forced to sell into one with a temporary competitive advantage. One of the most unusual and frankly astonishing claims that have surfaced during this recent period is the idea that Iran could potentially mandate its national currency, the rial, to be used exclusively for the payment of all shipping passage fees within the critically important Strait of Hormuz. Alright, if this scenario were to actually materialize, what exactly would we be discussing? We would be looking at a situation involving a compulsory demand for this particular currency, enormous, unprecedented financial flows, and a very significant attempt to effectively break the long-standing global dominance of the dollar. However, the fundamental and most important question that we need to consider is this genuinely possible? The realistic answer is, this issue is not simple at all. Let me explain why. The sanctions have made it virtually impossible to conduct any transactions using the Iranian rial on a global scale. International banks, in fact, do not deal with it whatsoever. The global financial system is profoundly reliant on the dollar. Therefore, even if the underlying idea exists, its implementation would prove to be exceedingly difficult. We also need to consider that the Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most vital waterways, but it's also an international passage. What does that mean? It means no nation can unilaterally impose tolls on it. Any attempt by Iran to impose any kind of fees or financial conditions would undoubtedly be interpreted as a direct military escalation, and this action could very easily drag the entire region into a much larger and more destructive conflict. Therefore, any discussion suggesting that Iran could potentially gain tens of billions of dollars from the strait is at this very moment extremely far removed from the actual reality of the situation. Well, putting aside all this commotion, let's take a look at the actual situation inside Iran. We'll find that the Iranian currency remains extremely weak, inflation is high, and sanctions continue to weigh heavily on the economy. So even with all the substantial gains Iran has made from its oil resources, the overall economic situation for the country is still very challenging. To put it more clearly, these gains are simply not sufficient to completely alter the entire situation. The real surprise, however, is that Iran was not the sole beneficiary of these developments. We'll observe Russia benefiting quite substantially from the significant increase in global oil prices, while China, on the other hand, successfully managed to secure its crucial supplies at very favorable and competitive prices. Additionally, companies within the energy and shipping sectors also managed to achieve considerable additional profits. What transpired is not a victory for a single nation. It's a complex global game of interests. This is precisely why we assert that the future could potentially unfold in multiple directions. Firstly, if this tension continues, we will undoubtedly see higher prices and significantly greater pressure on global markets. Now, if de-escalation were to occur, prices would then return to their normal state. But if there's an escalation in the Strait of Hormuz, then we would face a global economic crisis. Each one of these scenarios carries a very significant impact, not just on Iran, but on the entire world. In the end, the war actually did result in considerable advantages for Iran. However, these particular gains are only temporary, and there's absolutely no guarantee that they will continue to last much longer than this, because Iran has not truly established itself as a dominant power within the global energy market, nor has it successfully managed to fundamentally break the international financial system, but instead, it merely took advantage of a specific moment of global turmoil for its own strategic benefit. And here, I'll ask you a question at the end of this video, and I'll leave the answer entirely up to you. Can Iran truly maintain all these recent gains? Or was it all just a fleeting opportunity that has now passed? Thank you very much for watching, and I sincerely wish you all a very happy and blessed day.